Hi and welcome to Chess TV. We hope you've had a great week and that you're ready for a new episode of Chess TV. In the chess history, Professor Arne Johansson takes us through Swedish chess history in the 1870s. We've prepared a new tricky puzzle for you that will test your skills. Albert is tackling a new subject in Machiavelli and me, and Alfred and Adriana will continue to guide us through the Slav defense in the opening school. But before we hand over to Albert, here's some chess news. The 2012 FIDE World Amateur Championship is currently underway in Portocarras. After 7 rounds, Klaus Riemann from Germany defeated Harlombos Takarisis from Greece and took over the first place with 6.5 points. Oliver Johansson from Iceland and Fernando Moscotes from Colombia won their games and joined Takarisis on the shared second place, so an exciting finish is awaiting ahead. The Kramnik-Aronian match, the first 2,800 ELO match to ever be played, has now finally started. Visit kramnikaronian.com to follow the match live. British Grandmaster Nigel Short has won the 12th Bangkok Chess Club Open 2012 by a clear point, with a last round draw against international master Nguyen Du Qua, whose outstanding performance has earned the Vietnamese player a Grandmaster norm. From the beginning of the tournament, Short demonstrated his great fighting spirit. Having won the Gibraltar Chess Festival in January, it was apparent that he had come to Bangkok with a high confidence level and the mission to become the sole champion. And mission accomplished. Grandmaster Nigel Short played with passion and experience in the 4th consecutive BCC Open tournament and got his first win out of it, so congratulations. While defending champion Grandmaster Jan Gustafsson and women world champion Grandmaster Hu Yifan underperformed, other predominantly Asian participants played very well and often surpassed expectations. On BangkokChess.com you can find more information and pictures from the event. So, the international master Iveta Railic took some time off from competitive chess for a maternity leave, and when she came back she made sure to do it with a bang. What better way to show the world that you're back than by winning the first Saturday Grandmaster tournament held in Budapest ahead of 2 ex-world champions and scoring her 2nd Grandmaster norm on the way. Huge congratulations are in order. And with that, it's time for Albert, so here we go.
Today I thought we would talk about what is expected of a leader or ruler. Machiavelli writes in the chapter on what is required of a prince on military matters that the key is to apply the motto of Boy Scouts and always be prepared. A prince must have no other goal or thing in mind and not make any other thing his duty than war and its rules and commitments. That skill, and only that, is according to Machiavelli a prince's main feature. A prince's rise to power is due to the fact that he has mastered the art of war. Should he neglect it, he would quickly lose his power. You should never neglect your war training, because you really never know when you might need it. And the tricky part is that you often need it the most when you least expect it. That's why you should always be ready. And to be just that, you need to practice constantly. Besides the need to ensure that your troops and weapons are ready, you also need to be ready yourself, by training and studying. Machiavelli stresses the importance of being practically and theoretically well schooled. You have to learn to understand your surroundings, the playing field, because that's when you'll be able to take advantage of its resources to best effect. But there's also another important aspect of it. If you know how to fight on home turf, it's easy to adapt the fight to whichever arena you want or need to. War rules and tips and tricks works in almost all kinds of situations where you have to fight for your cause against an opposing will. As for the theoretical training, a prince has to study historical examples of wins and defeats, to see the mistakes or great deeds of previous rulers and learn from their wisdom. This is how a wise prince should behave, and never rest, even in peacetime. He should train and study relentlessly to gain a foundation to lean on in adversity, so that when luck changes, he would be ready. You can't always win every battle, but if you're well prepared and have a clear mind, at least you're giving yourself the best possible conditions for success.
Welcome to a new episode of the Opening School. During the last couple of weeks, we've been analyzing the Slav defense, which we'll continue with in this week's episode as well. It's one of the most popular openings and there's a lot of theory behind it. Last week we analyzed Black's alternate fourth moves to the main line, but we also had a quick view on a line in which Black played the most popular fourth move. Could you run us through it again, Alfred? What were the main points?
In last week's episode, I introduced Black's knight to f6 as the most popular continuation for Black, and this is the variation we'll continue on with in this week's episode. The purpose behind the move is to strengthen the Black position without creating any obvious weaknesses, and it is the stability this move offers which has made it the most popular choice.
Last week you showed us that White should play knight to c3 in this position and that this follows the same reasoning as Black had when choosing knight to f6 with one exception, namely that White has left the pawn on c4 unguarded. The c4 pawn is not a so-called poisoned pawn, it's actually completely okay to capture it. Would you say that the best continuation for Black is to take it?
To capture the pawn is absolutely a possibility for Black. It isn't the most popular continuation though. But even so, many consider this to be the true Slav defense, and because of that, also the main line. The most obvious plan for Black is to protect the pawn on c4 by playing b5, and if White would play a move like e4, Black can protect the pawn by playing just b5, leaving White without any real chance of getting the pawn back.
Playing e4 in this position is actually to play a gambit, and as we all know, gambits are by nature risky and often filled with tactical maneuvers. If you want to play it, it's important that you don't get cold feet halfway through. What alternatives does White have here besides the gambit?
Well, actually, there are a couple of paths for White to choose between in order to capture the pawn, and strangely enough, one of them is e3. The reason why this move can get the pawn back while e4 can't is because White puts its own pawn under pressure by playing e4. The details on how Black should act will be analyzed in a later episode. Today I thought that we would take a closer look at White's a4 instead.
Typically, you don't really want to move your A or H pawn in the opening. The whole point with the opening is to activate your pieces and win territory, preferably in the center of the board. This move is the equivalent of choosing the outer track in a race. It'll just take you longer time to get to the finish line. Is it really that important to stop b5 that White should sacrifice a developing move?
The short answer is yes. Of course, White can play e3 and e4 like I mentioned, but other moves like the natural-looking development move bishop to f4 instead of a4 is not to be recommended, because it gives up the entirety of the queen side to Black. a4 might not be a typical move to play in an opening, but in this specific situation it's needed in order to hold Black back.
White's a4 opens up the question, what does Black do next here? The big plan was to play b5 and conquer the queen side, which is impossible now. What's Black's backup plan? How do you protect the pawn?
Well, it's quite difficult to protect the pawn, and actually Black shouldn't even try too hard to keep it. Possible moves like bishop to e6 are very short-sighted, and they only end up hurting the Black piece development. What Black should play instead is bishop to f5. It is a simple move, and that's why it's so good. There are of course also other possible continuations, and one of them is bishop to g4, which is a bit more aggressive. An interesting variations occurs after knight to e5, bishop to h5, f3, knight f to d7, knight takes on c4, and e5. White can now mainly choose between knight takes on e5 and e4, but if White would happen to capture an e5 with the pawn, Black can counter with queen to h4 check, which wins the knight on c4 after g3 and queen takes on c4.
With this little trap, we end this week's episode of the Opening School. In summary, we can say that today we've seen a small sample of what the Slav defense has to offer. It's a variation which allows many different continuations, and it opens up for players to lead the game into position that suit their particular style of playing. We will of course be back again next week with more on the Slav defense. See you then!
In this week's chess puzzle, we'll take a look at an old puzzle that was published in the Swedish newspaper Ny Illustrerad Tidning in 1878, which Arne Johansson will tell you more about later. The puzzle was composed by Robert Sahlberg and first presented at the Stockholm Chess Society's 12th birthday in 1878. It is a checkmate in 2 moves that white performs on black. You have 1 minute to find the 2 moves, so good luck. See, there are not many pieces left at the board and we clearly have the upper hand. Still, finding the checkmate in 2 moves is a bit tricky. The first 2 moves you naturally start to analyze are Rook A8 and Queen A7, thus the 2 checking possibilities. On Rook E8 check, the black answer is King B7. Our rook is now hanging and we don't have a checkmate in 1 move. On the other move, Queen E8 check, black once again plays King B7, and in order to checkmate black here, we in fact need 2 more moves, namely Queen A8 check, King B6, and Queen A6 checkmate. This means that we will not be checking the king in our first move, and as we have seen, black has a very good escape square here, B7, which we must ensure to guard. We should therefore cover B7 in such a way that our next move could be a checkmate. Rook A7 does not work at all because black only responds with King B8. It looks like if Queen B4 is an option here due to the blocking of B7 and B8 and a checkmate with the Queen to F8 after black's move King D8. And the fact that we are threatening Rook A8 checkmate results in that it's not enough that black just tries to block our Queen diagonal with pawn to C5. But Queen B4 is still not the right move here, because black only responds with pawn D6, opening an escape opportunity with D7, and then we do not have a checkmate in 1 move. However, the result is completely different after our first move, Rook B5. The rook blocks B7 and B8, and it isn't really a move you can easily find. But what is interesting about it is that if black just captures the rook with his pawn, he opens up the queen's diagonal towards A8, and then we can play Queen A8 checkmate. And that is also what we play on black's other choice, pawn to C5. If black responds with King D8 on Rook B5, we play Rook B8 checkmate. And if black instead of the king move would choose to play pawn D6 in this position, we reply with Queen E8 checkmate again. I hope you found the solution to this beautiful and challenging chess puzzle. Now it's time for Professor Arne Johansson, who will tell you more about the Swedish Ny Illustrerad Tidning from which this puzzle was taken. So enjoy!
Last week I talked about the news from 1877 that were reported in Illustrated London News, and today I will devote my attention to the Swedish counterpart of the journal and have chosen the volume from 1878 of Ny Illustrerad Tidning, which was published weekly in Stockholm. Even if it's somewhat more modest in size, it is still a bit heavy as bed literature. Why choose this particular year? Well, there is an old Swedish saying that this or that hasn't happened since the Eldkvarn burnt down, simply meaning that it was a very long time ago. But when did this old mill, Eldkvarn, actually burn? Well, it was 1878, and the event was of course reported and illustrated in Ny Illustrerad Tidning, like this in the issue from November 9, and the sad remains in the following issue. The mill was located where the Stockholm City Hall can be found today. Another event that was reported was that the Swedish colony St. Bartholomew in the West Indies was turned over to France in 1878, which was illustrated like this from the capital Gustavia, which actually still bears that name. As in Illustrated London News, also Ny Illustrerad Tidning reported on some of the world news and scientific breakthroughs, and had fine illustrations. The great Carl von Linné is depicted on a cover in remembrance of the centennial of his death on January 10, 1778. In the scientific field, it was reported about the new tower of the Stockholm Observatory. Another report was about the phonograph, and more specifically the talking phonograph, as it was called. In modern times, one could perhaps say that Steve Jobs with his iPad and other gadgets have taken Edison's role as a pioneering American inventor. The chess column appeared in almost every issue and was written by Robert Salberg, the secretary of the Stockholm Schacksällskap, and an antiquarian book dealer. In March 1878, he could report on the Stockholm Workers' Chess Club that they celebrated their 4th anniversary with a festivity with speeches and chess playing. The chess column contained a problem every week and short notes about chess events like the chess game played by telegraph between Copenhagen and Christiania, or Oslo as we call it now. The game was played between midnight and 6 o'clock in the morning, which was the time they could get access to the telegraph line. The game ended after almost 6 hours when the Copenhagen team declared mate in 3 moves. A chess problem that had a theme from the war between Russia and Turkey was this one, with the title The Russian March over Balkan. With that specific title as a clue, I can give you 30 seconds to solve this problem to mate black in 8 moves. Well, the solution is of course tightly coupled to the clue, and we note that the only thing black can do in the original position is to move the bishop back and forth between g1 and h2. so white can peacefully march with his king from h3 to a4 and then mate with the bishop taking on b3. There was also some reports on correspondence games like the ones between Stockholm and Christiania chess societies, which the Stockholm team won, and some international news like reports from the International Chess Congress in Paris. Well, we end this little chess historical report here with a game played by telegraph between the Copenhagen and Christiania. So enjoy.
Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back again next week, so hope to see you then. Bye!